I'll kick off then. Thanks everyone for coming along to the bike share procurement advice surgery. Sounds pretty dry. Hope that it's not. Hope that we can give you some kind of insights into what we've seen as an operator, and kind of give you some ideas as how you may be able to kind of procure a bike share service yourself, and look at the scales at which it could be successful, how you can find funding, and what you might be able to deliver as part of a bike share procurement. If you have any questions, there is a Q&A panel, but if you feel more comfortable doing it in the comments, I think that's fine. Actually, I think Q&A seems to be quite a barren wasteland. So let's maybe keep it to the comments so we can, monitor everything that's coming in. Cool. So I did ask a poll. At the moment, 85% of people have heard of Beryl, which is great. One person has not. So this will be for your benefit, whoever you are. So Beryl are a micro-mobility company. We are the UK's largest. We're based down in London, and we have about 115 staff now, delivering bike, e-bike, e-scooter, and shortly e-cargo bike services across the UK. We develop everything in-house. We've developed our own bike, e-bike. We've augmented an e-scooter. We've augmented an e-cargo bike. We have our own app and technology platform that we also sell to cities across the world, actually. At the moment, we have 7 live systems in the UK, and one of which will be launching this November. So BCP is Bournemouth and Christchurch and Poole, a pedal bike and e-scooter system with about 1,000 vehicles. Hereford, which I'll be talking about in a bit more detail shortly, with 210 bikes. Isle of Wight is just e-scooters. Manchester will be launching this November. Norwich is the UK's first bike, e-bike and e-scooter mixed micro-mobility fleet, all under one provider. We are the technology provider to TfL, so we provide all on-bike tracking and technology. For Transport for West Midlands, we provide all of that technology, plus we provide the platform services and our own smartphone app. And in Watford, we also provide bikes and e-bikes. So we've got some really interesting data that's coming out of these different schemes, and we're able to look at the interplay between the different modes, because obviously we've seen what systems are like with just bikes, with bikes and e-bikes, with pedal bikes and e-scooters, with pedal bikes, e-bikes and e-scooters. We're starting to work out what the different journey purposes are and how we can best switch the most people away from private car. And we have about 3,000 vehicles out on the street at the moment, and they deliver about 5,000 journeys every day. So in terms of bike share and procurement, I wanted to talk a bit about the feasibility of bike shares. Very often we talk about bike share, we talk about your Londons, your Barcelonas, and your Parises, but we don't often realize that it could be an enabler of active travel across a wide range of urban areas across the world, in particular in the UK. So I will probably focus today, or I definitely will focus today, on our system in Hereford, which, obviously isn't our biggest system, but I think it's a good demonstrator of how bike share can provide a reliable and real alternative to the private car, even in smaller urban areas in the UK. So as I've mentioned, Hereford itself, we've had a system there for about 2 years, and the city itself is 63,000 people. And across that city, we provide 230 bikes, 30 of which are e-bikes, 66 parking bays. And we also work with a local cargo bike logistics firm that was already set up in the city, doing parcel deliveries and also doing waste collection. So we wanted to leverage that local experience when we came to Hereford. And they are Peddy Cargo, and you can see them distributing their bikes there. Everything there is therefore zero emission, which was a big part of what we wanted to bring to the table as a bike share operator. We're a B Corp, so we're committed to an environmental and social good, and obviously the redistribution and support and operations side of our bike share services is a big part of that, and we've always strived for zero emission redistribution, and operations wherever we now operate. So a little bit on Hereford. I've just I looked at the 200 most populous places in the UK this morning, and I thought a quick video of me scrolling down this list would be an effective way to demonstrate where Hereford sits on that list of populous cities, as it's relatively small, and it's not obviously the first place you'd think of when you think of a successful bike share operation. There it is, 154, and the first 200 places in the UK have over 50,000 people. And we actually think that if delivered properly, successfully, smartly, using the latest technology and operations, you can deliver a really effective bike share service that enables real mode shift, reduces congestion at a very, relatively small scale. In fact, at that scale, the top 200 most populous places in the UK would absolutely be able to demonstrate an effective system. So why would bike share work in Hereford? Well, smaller places like Hereford are actually eminently cyclable. I've just taken the Google Map route across the city. So if I go through the city on a nice quiet route as opposed to the A road, it would take me 19 or 20 minutes to go from the very far west to the very far east. So it's a really easily cyclable city. And what have we done in those 2 years? So we've had 140,000 journeys, 12,000 users, 95% parking compliance. And I'll come back onto parking compliance and how we've enabled that shortly. 24% mode shift from cars, 37% mode shift from any vehicle. So that's cars, taxis, and motorbikes. And that means that we've removed 52,000 journeys from that network. And we've got 92% customer satisfaction. So this has also delivered a real kind of economic benefit. And this is part of the sell that we've been making to councils and their investment, and part of their justification, helping them make their justification to their constituents, to their councillors, as to why this is a worthwhile investment. So I'll come back onto how this is funded in it shortly, but effectively, Hereford have paid us £140,000 for the journeys that have been undertaken. They've also paid £100,000 for additional e-bikes that they wanted to add to the system through the town deal fund. So this has meant that they have had a cost-benefit ratio of 1.5 to 1, using the heat tool as a way to generate an economic value on those 140,000 journeys. And that's just after 2 years. And now that the e-bikes have been paid for, that cost-benefit ratio will continue to increase. So how has this been enabled? How have we made a commercially viable, successful system work in a small urban area in the UK? Well, technology has been a massive enabler of the ability to deliver these bike share services. So GPS technology and technology in general on bike share bikes has come along a long way since we talked about the offos and mobikes 2 or 3 years ago, as you'll all be aware. What technology has enabled us to do is use GPS tracking, use effective power management on dynamos, use geofencing to enable a parking bay-based system at a fraction of the cost. So all of our services are based around designated parking areas, and we enable this by live tracking on the bike and through what we call an out-of-bay fee. And we see a really strong positive correlation between the out-of-bay fee and parking compliance. So you can see the green box there. If you were to park the Beryl bike within that green box, we would know within 1 or 2 meters accuracy for the most part if you'd parked it in there or not. If you have parked it in there, we charge you the flat rate of 5p a minute. If you don't park it in that green square, we would charge you an additional out-of-bay fee. And we see at £1 out-of-bay fee, you get about 74% compliance. £2, 85% compliance. And £5, you get about 96% compliance. So you see a very structured, very ordered, very safe and responsible bike share system can be delivered through geofencing and painted bays. And these painted bays can be installed at a fraction of the cost. So £250 as opposed to a old docked system might have been anywhere between £15,000 and £25,000 to provide the same capacity at one location. And this has meant that we've been able to install lots of these parking locations. And we see, again, a very strong positive correlation between the number of rides that you'll get and the density of the parking network. So in Hereford, a small city of 63,000 people, we have 66 parking locations. And that has really been the enabler, alongside, obviously, the bikes that are on street and being great quality, this high level of journeys to be realized in Hereford. And we see this density of parking as a real enabler for these journeys. And this is in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. There's a 100-kilometre squared service area there. And we've installed 330 of these parking bays. This is a scale that would never have been able to be achieved previously if we'd have used a traditional kind of docking model. But now we can actually install more of these locations, rely on the security and safety of the bike, make the bikes the smart element, not the dock, and really generate lots of trips by making these services very, very convenient. This is the 5-minute walk time or 4-minute walk time, I think, radius put around each of those parking bays that we've got in BCP. So we've covered nearly 75% of people that live within BCP. So 75% of 400,000 people live within a 5-minute walk of their nearest parking bay. So they can pick up or drop off a bike within a 5-minute walk of their home. And that convenience, combined with the pricing, which is 5p a minute, makes it a very viable alternative to using their private car. And that's why we've seen success in shifting people out of a private vehicle. So I guess I'll summarize in a second. Actually, I just wanted to show you a couple of other parking station infrastructure pieces that we have. So obviously, we've dealt with a lot of different councils and councillors. Lots of people want to see a bit more order and a kind of aesthetic value to the kind of parking that they have in their cities. So we have developed different kind of levels of parking infrastructure that can suit budgets, can suit the aesthetics of the city. And this is what we'll be deploying in Manchester. So very ordered, very aligned parking bays. But again, because docks are dumb, there's no technology on the docks. All the technology is on the smart bike or the smart scooter or the smart e-bike. These again can be deployed quite cheaply, particularly in comparison to our kind of historic knowledge of docking stations. And what it also means is that if you do have funding, you can start to use that in a more interesting way. So we've developed a parklet strategy for Norwich and Watford, in fact. And so we've used the funding that they did have, and instead of spending the bulk of it on old school big metal docks to hold bikes in place, we were able to use it on planters and benches and really work together with their transport and urban realm team to embed the bike share service into their kind of more holistic transport strategy. So this is part of a walking strategy. It's got places to stop and rest. It's part of a SUD strategy. It's got planting and soil to absorb rainwater. So yeah, we really want to use funding where it's available to bring the maximum benefit to the urban realm. And these are also really great because they are not as controversial, although they, best practice would be that they remove car parking, which would be controversial. But if they don't, lots of businesses like to see these parklets outside their premises. We worked with their coffee shop and we deployed a parklet outside of it. They shared their takings, pre-installation of parklet and post. And by creating this mini transport interchange with a place to stop and a place to rest and to sit down and have their takeaway coffee, although it wasn't licensed, they could take a takeaway coffee and sit down. But their revenue increased 22% post-implementation of that parklet. So in the future, it may be something that we can speak to business improvement districts to help fund, to specific businesses themselves to help fund these installations and interventions as part of a bike share service. And there it is from the other angle. And again, if we're talking about economies of spend, we've spoken to Manchester about using the modular aspects of our parking and our bike parking bays to create, they could be the materials that create your low traffic neighborhoods. And absolutely, where you're creating a low traffic neighborhood, you want to be offering a viable alternative to the private car. So using the bike share service to create an LTN whilst also providing the option to cycle is a great way to combine, funding pots or even, any kind of staff resource. And in terms of the funding, we know that, for the most part, councils are kind of capital rich, revenue poor for the most part. And that we can run bike share services just with capital funding, just to buy the assets and to mobilize the project. Likewise, we can also run a bike share service just with revenue funding. So in Hereford, the model that we have is we draw down £1 every time somebody rides one of our bikes. And what that means is that rather be paid a management fee to keep the service operational, we're enthused as an operator to get as many rides as we possibly can to make sure that scheme is as successful as we can, to draw down, and we do put a cap on it, but to draw down as much money from that revenue pot as possible. And that's been a really great way for Hereford to spend that money, because they're only spending money if they're getting real ridership. And so they're quite happy with that model. Equally, revenue funding can pay for a managed service. So our next launch in Manchester will be a managed service. And this gives you a lot more control over the system because you as a council would take the revenue and control the tariff. But obviously this has a slightly higher cost because you're really owning the entire service. So to conclude, I guess for that first section, just wanted to talk a bit about, although there's all these amazing cities where bike share works, we shouldn't forget the hundreds of, large towns, small mid-sized cities that are across the UK where bike share could provide a cost-effective way to really alleviate congestion and really get people out of their cars. And technology has been a real enabler of this. Not only has it enabled it to be deployed cheaper, it's also being able to be deployed better. You've got a better bike, you've got way more parking locations. And that is really what enables you to get people out of their cars and onto a bike share bike. And I won't dwell too much on the funding opportunities. I think that probably today you'll have heard a lot about different government strategies. You'll probably already be aware of the various funding opportunities, the high-level funding opportunities that are available to councils, and most councils already have this funding. I think the takeaway from this might be that if you see that your council or has one of these funding pots, then they might or not have assigned it to a specific transport project or even a specific project. So I think there's still an opportunity to put bike share in front of decision makers as a way to align with these funding pots that I'll just go into as a cost-effective way of delivering a real transport change. So obviously we know that the Gear for Change has come out, and that's a really great indicator of central government thinking and their move towards active travel and putting it on the agenda. So even the top down now is making the case for cycling, and bike share is a big enabler of getting new cyclists in cities and towns across the UK. And in addition to that, 74% of local authorities in the UK have declared a climate emergency. That's 300 councils. So I'm sure that, I don't know who's on the call here on the presentation today, but I'm sure your councils will be one of those. And the majority of them have declared that they're aiming to be net zero by 2030, which is only 8 years away. So there's a real need to change quickly and to invest in projects that can deliver an immediate benefit, like bikeshare. In terms of the funding opportunities, well, there's obviously the Levelling Up Fund, which actually calls out cycling specifically. That's 4.8 billion to invest in local transport networks that can revitalize local economies to boost growth. The Towns Fund is 3.6 billion, investing in towns as part of the government's plan to level up regions. And this should drive long-term economic productivity through growth and investment in connectivity. So this is the way in which we actually funded the £100,000 worth of e-bikes in Hereford. We used the Towns Fund to make that investment because it aligned with this idea of creating an investment in connectivity. There's the Community Renewal Fund, which is an investment in communities in place, and also the Future High Streets Fund, which looks at the regeneration of town centres through innovative proposals around transport. So obviously, if you can get more people to your town centre, that is a great way to do it, is through bike share. And actually, we've seen, even if you have a bike share service in operation, we're working with a lot of our cities to use bike share as a way to reinvigorate those high streets. So, for instance, in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, they are using funding that they've received to make specific parking locations on specific high streets free to cycle to. So we can enable an end of bay discount. So we can select certain bays, parking bays around a city, around a town, that would be free to cycle to. And we are now working on a kind of regen high streets project with BCP, Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, where that will take place this October. And as you'll see there on the left-hand side, that's 9.62 billion. And the levels at which we're looking for investment for bike shares, is minuscule compared to most of these. Most of the Towns Funds awards are around £20 million. And we've managed in Hereford to get a full city-wide bike share service running for 3 years with just over £200,000. A quick note on future changes. So obviously, the landscape in micromobility is changing every week, every month, every year. And this does bring in new commercial opportunities to both operators and to cities and to councils. And probably the biggest of those at the moment is the advent of the e-scooters. So we operate e-scooters in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. We operate them in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, it's a pedal bike and e-scooter. In the Isle of Wight, we just operate e-scooters. And in Norwich, we operate bikes, e-bikes and e-scooters. Now, obviously, you have to be quite careful about the introduction of e-scooters. They do drive a lot of ridership, but if you have an existing bike share service or e-bike share service and you introduce a competitor that is an e-scooter provider, you will likely cannibalize some of those bike share trips. And I think that's been happening in a few cities in the UK. However, when it's under one provider and you can really control and tweak the numbers of each vehicle, aligning with your transport objectives for the whole city, you can really start to see the benefits of a one exclusive provider with all of the vehicles. I mean, we see about 25% of users use all of our vehicles interchangeably. So having those vehicles all under one app, one provider, has really brought a benefit and increased the number of journeys. And actually, when we added in our e-scooters to Norwich, you can see here the pedal bike is the green, the e-bike is the yellow. They added on a huge number of trips to that system almost immediately. But if you'll notice, they didn't actually degrade the number of trips that were experienced on the pedal bike or e-bike. There were a whole new raft of users, new raft of journeys that were being enabled by having this different vehicle type. And these huge number of users and this new number of journeys that are enabled also drives ridership and commercial viability. So the addition of e-scooters into any kind of future procurement could mean that it can offset some of the costs that you would require. So if you wanted to procure a e-bike and e-scooter share service, e-scooters may help you in reducing that initial capital requirement, or if not, just removing any need for any kind of revenue support funding. So it's been a really interesting thing that we've seen, and yeah, it obviously has to be that step needs to be taken with some caution. Obviously, most of the targets are for active travel. This is obviously not inherently active travel. Obviously, if you have a parking bay based network, someone has to walk to a scooter, scoot it, and then finish their walk. So it's kind of like a bus trip where you have a small walk portion at either end, so it's slightly active. But obviously, you need to consider your targets with regards to active travel in your wider transport ambitions. So I think that was it for me. I just wanted to kind of, to summarize, bike share can be applied at all levels and can generate rides and can generate mode shift. It can do so very cost effectively, as we've seen in Hereford, where they used a small pot of revenue funding to enable a big amount of immediate cycling trips. And there are new models emerging. Not only is there huge amounts of central government funding through the Levelling Up Fund, Town Deals, Future High Streets. I didn't even mention the TCF. And actually, I didn't also mention Section 106 monies, which is also enabling a bike share service in a city we're looking at kind of operating in shortly. But e-scooters also can help you as an authority make a more commercially viable service. That was it from me. I don't know if there's any
Seems that we've got some questions in there. Are you happy to take them, or do you need to reply? Maybe we can start with the first one. It's like, how did your e-bikes does work, and do they charge their batteries, or do you do like swappable batteries?
Sure. So we can do both. Our current way of charging batteries is through battery swapping, as is common kind of, I guess the vast majority of micromobility services across the world actually use battery swapping. We've done a lot of work on this recently, and I think there was this perception that battery swapping was inherently kind of not wasteful is the wrong word, but inefficient. But actually we found that it can be quite efficient because there's obviously mixed different types of journeys that they're going to fix a bike, so they may as well swap a battery. They're going to check up on a bike, so they may swap a battery. They go to check up on a bay, and they may as well swap all the batteries. So you can get some definite efficiencies there. We found that if you wanted to remove all of your battery swapping tasks from a bike share scheme, you would need to electrify between 18 and say 30% of your most popular parking bays to ensure that you removed 95% of your battery swapping jobs. And we've looked into this in great detail. I think the problem we have at the moment is COVID-19 changed travel behavior so much that pre-pandemic, our most popular parking bays were very different to the most popular parking bays now. And that's really the pivoting of trips from commuting and shopping and a bit of leisure to, leisure focused with a bit of commuting and a bit of shopping. So it would be quite hard for us to strategically choose those most popular bays right now, because if we made that investment now, in 12 months' time, the most popular bays could have changed, and we would still need to do a fair amount of battery swapping. So it's quite hard to strategically select and make it a cost-effective way to run a e-bike share service, because we could electrify all the bays, but but it would cost millions. So the cost-effective way is just doing the most popular, but equally, that's a quite hard decision to make at the moment when travel behaviours are changing so quickly. Funding options are nationwide. I would have to check up on that, actually. I've not thought about that. I assumed they were. I think they're just England, but I can look into some specific Scottish funding options as well. Do we prefer to work with councils that have done a bike share feasibility study first? Okay. Or are you willing to work with a council from scratch? I mean, obviously, if the council has done a lot of work, then that can help the mobilization phase. It may be quicker, but equally, we enable 5,000 journeys every day. We have a very good understanding of what makes a successful bike share service or micromobility service. And in fact, if I was a council, I'd probably use that as a scoring mechanism and ask the tenderers, if they were tendering, to design their system, to a relatively high level as part of that procurement process to get some of that work done almost for free. But obviously, if the work has been done, then that's great. We can hit the ground running, but also we see it as almost a differentiator for us because we've planned and mobilized 6 bike share services in the UK and are actually being procured ourselves as planners for other bike share services. So we can work with either. I think if councils have limited funding, and it was the option between being able to deliver more bikes on street, then maybe we would prefer just to crack on and do it ourselves and use that funding instead to provide more assets on street. Okay, yeah. Equalities with the light touch base. Yeah, absolutely. So we use Manual for Streets, DFT Manual for Streets for our kind of planning elements. So there's always a 2.1 meter gap between the edge of the parking bay and the edge of the footway, firstly. So we've made sure that we've only ever used areas of wide footway. We also, for the specifically on the issue of blind and partially sighted people, we share the entire bay network before it's confirmed with local visually impaired groups. They're able to feedback their comments. So previously we've had, we know that people with a vision impairment sometimes use the wall as a guide. So we've had to remove or change the placement of the bay so it's not alongside a wall. We know that there are routes that are prioritized by people, so routes across cities that are preferred by people with visual impairments. So we try not to place the bays on those, or not in busy areas on those. And we also do guided walking tours with visual impairment groups prior to launch, so that they can realize where these new parking locations will be if they are on their priority routes. And then alongside that, there's obviously the planning element. There's also the operations. So we have specific KPIs with the organizations we work with that say that if there's a bike causing a danger or obstruction, it needs to be removed immediately. I mean, luckily we've never had any of those issues because of the high levels of parking compliance and good user behavior. But that is a KPI that you could put into your procurement, that they need to be removed immediately, and there can be penalties if that isn't achieved. And likewise, it often comes up as a scored question within a tender. How will you ensure that you don't operate with detriment to the people that are kind of walking in the urban realm? I don't know if there are any other questions or comments coming in, or anything anyone else would like to know about the service and solution and how we've managed to deploy it. Give you another minute to think of any the scooter journeys are coming from. Is it walking or buses? Scooter journeys actually are very similar to, let me just see if I can get up a mode shift document. They're basically the same as bikes and e-bikes. In fact, there's a little bit more mode shift from e-scooters. Okay, let me get this up. I'll just share a different tab. Yeah, so that, oh, you can't see that, can you? This is our data for e-scooters overall. I don't think you can see that either. Let me just increase the font size. Effectively, it's the same. Slightly better, actually. 23.5% shift from cars on e-scooters, 5.5% from taxis, 3.2 motorbike, and bus 7.6, train 4.1, walking 48, and bike 8. Of course, that may change as travel behaviours change. So bus and trains, they too are seeing reduced occupancy rates due to lack of commuting, I guess. So in a world where people are going back into the office, we may see those pieces of the pie chart start to increase again. But it was very enthusing for us as a company to see that e-scooters were as effective at generating mode shift, because we started off life as a bike share company, and our main aim is to reduce reliance on the private car, and we didn't want to be scooter trips being taken away from public transport and walking as opposed to the car. So this has been really great, because actually I think evidence from the continent, particularly I think there was a large scale study done in France where the mode shift from cars wasn't as great. I think it was around between 5 and 8%. I can't remember off the top of my head. It wasn't as good as this, but with the numbers of vehicles, we just hit over 100,000 e-scooter trips in Bournemouth, Christchurch, and Poole, with only 200 vehicles on the street, only operational for 6 months, and they are the same. It's 24% in Bournemouth, Christchurch, and Poole. So that's 24,000 car journeys removed just by putting those 200 scooters on the street. So it's been really effective. Just get the other presentation back up. Yeah, I don't think there's probably anything else to go over. Anyone else have any questions? This one, how do you arrest potential issues of vandalism? Yes, well, Mobike, I think Mobike was a different breed of bike share service. I think, I'd like to think that we've iterated on from a Mobike solution and service, and actually there was very little operational support given to those Mobike bikes. But I guess we have it from a kind of multi-pronged approach to reducing vandalism on our scheme. So we designed the bike. We have a team of designers in-house. They are iterating and improving that bike all the time. So we have seen issues of vandalism. There are some very determined people out there that seemingly can come by a hacksaw very easily and are willing to use said hacksaw very frequently if they can. But we've designed out these issues. We've made, we've reinforced that rear wheel lock. We've reinforced the bolt that goes through the wheel. We've got new protectors on the side of it. And this has all meant that the design of the bike has designed out those very determined vandals. So that's the design of the bike is one element. The design of the scheme is another. So you've got to be very careful about, or very, very thoughtful in where you place those parking bays. So you want to make sure there's high levels of natural visual surveillance, equally CCTV surveillance. Installing CCTV at some problem bays has really eradicated the problem of vandalism. And then also there's the community engagement, but also early engagement with the police. I think a mistake we made when we first started was launching a scheme and then engaging the police and telling them about it. Whereas Now, when we launch a scheme, they're almost the first person we speak to 9-12 months before we put anything on street. So they're engaged from the outset about what to look out for, how to help us, and vice versa. We help. There are crimes that are committed on people riding Beryl bikes, and we have a kind of good relationship with the police by providing them with data that's helped them solve crimes. So I think that police engagement and collaboration is a really important part of it. But there will always be vandalism. But you can design out a lot of it by good bike design, tracking the bike as well. We help TfL retrieve hundreds of bikes every year just by being able to know exactly where they are. And lots of these bikes, if they're vandalized, stolen, make their way back into the scheme eventually. But we can help that. We can help that process be a lot quicker because we know exactly where the bike is. And all of the tracking is embedded into the frame of the bike, which means that you can't just knock a bit off and knock the lock off and go cycling and then it's lost forever. We know exactly where that bike is all the time. Is there any evidence that e-scooters are used more by a particular age group? Yeah, there is. It's not particularly significantly different, but we do see that e-scooter users skew quite a lot younger, and e-bike users skew a bit older, so 45, 50 and above. Whereas, most popular age group is between 18 and 24 for e-scooters. Let me just read a couple more of these comments. Community engagement has made a big difference between Glasgow and Edinburgh. Scotsman article suggests low tariffs for income groups helps. Yeah, absolutely. If someone feels excluded from a service, then they absolutely won't feel like it's for them, and they'll have no issues destroying it. I guess there's just that is another great way to engage and have community engagement. But I think it's definitely a kind of multi-pronged approach. Your product's got to be right. You've got to design it in the right way, and you've got to have, as you say, that community engagement. And a part of it is having low tariffs for people on low incomes and being able to target them. Working in close partnership with the council as a way in which to help engage or even help communicate with those people. So we've we work with job seekers across all of our systems now. So anyone that's put into a placement via job seekers, they get free access to the bikeshare system. Equally, we as a company, we employ many Kickstarters, which is a government-funded scheme to get out of work young people back into employment. So not only are we helping people that are on lower incomes access the scheme, we're actually giving them employment via the scheme. And that's, a real big part of the project for us. As I said, we are a B Corp, so we have changed our articles of association to mean that we are a company committed to a social and societal good, and to be able to offer employment, trained, skilled employment in a growing industry such as bikes and bikeshare. Look at how many bikes were sold during the COVID crisis. Look at the waiting list for bikes. Look at the waiting list to get a bike fixed. It is huge. So being able to give people training and the skill set in this industry is really important right now, especially as e-mobility is becoming so important. Our staff are learning about different types of electric motors now, and Bros at Bosch, all of these, they're becoming experts in each, and these are really really important skill sets that they will be able to take into future employment. Just a quick look. How do rates of vandalism compare between bikes and scooters? Yeah, I think we tended to see more vandalism in pedal bikes because people wanted to actually just ride them for free to start with. So if you vandalize a scooter, it has no functional value. They're relatively heavy. You would get pretty bored of vandalizing it pretty quickly. Same as an e-bike, it has no kind of, as I say, functional value once you've vandalized it. But we did in Bournemouth. We had some issues for a short period where people were using that hacksaw to get at the lock so they could go off on a free ride. And it was almost I don't know. As a type of vandalism, it did show that there was this latent demand to use a bike to get around. So it was quite interesting that our main reason for vandalizing was to have a free journey. But now that that's been kind of designed out, it's all kind of much of a muchness. It's all kind of, the only vandalism we see now is petty vandalism, the odd smashing of a light bulb, the breaking of a kickstand and things like that. Any more for any more? I think we've got, how long have we got left? I think we've got 10 minutes or so. Is that correct? Yeah. But equally, if you want to, I mean, we work with lots of councils and lots of different partners to just go through the very kind of high level scoping exercise we can do that will help you realize the number of bikes you might need, bikes, e-bikes, even the blend of bikes, e-bikes, e-scooters that you might need. The number of parking bays that we think you would require, and very happy to do that with anyone that wants to know what it might kind of cost to get a bike share service going in their region.
Seems that we have one last question. Do you allow users to park out of hub using public cycle parkings?
As in use existing Sheffield stands and cycle infrastructure. I think as a cycling company, a historically cycling company, we want to not. Definitely, I know I'd be super annoyed if I saw a Beryl bike taking up a Sheffield stand when I got to a location. So because we don't need to, we prefer not to use public cycle parking, because we see that as a facility that's built for the public, and if we can park our bikes not requiring that infrastructure, then we should, effectively. Anything else for anyone? Can't think of any interesting anecdotes in this final few minutes that might be of interest. Probably covered it all.
I will just add our emails, so in case anyone want to reach out after the event, feel free just to contact either Pat or myself, and we'll be happy to take any questions or any comments or engage with anyone.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. Great. Well, if that's it, I guess we will leave it there. I don't know if anyone from Landor is on the call. Do we close the meeting down, or do we just allow it to gradually fade away? Chris Wade, I'm thinking hospitals.
I think the previous question is related to, do you set up hubs for particular organizations?
Oh,
so thinking about
yes,
hospitals.
Absolutely, yeah, we do. I mean, in fact, in COVID, we were setting up some hubs within 24 hours of a request, particularly for GP surgeries, because people didn't want to use public transport. So we had a contractor on speed dial that was able to go out there and install a parking bay. Yeah, as I say, within 24 hours. And that's part of the benefit of the kind of geofenced and painted. You can install them very quickly. And in fact, even more generally, like the dumb docks that we just discussed. So just the, cradle because they don't need wiring or anything like that, you can install 2 or 3 of those docking stations a day with a small team. But yeah, we work in close collaboration with a lot of hospitals across the areas. And in fact, we had a big free ride for NHS staff promotion throughout the pandemic. So if you logged in with an @nhs.uk domain name, it would automatically give you your rides for free. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. I hope that was of value. And as I say, our details are there. So if you want to email either of us for any more information, please feel free. And I'll give you a shout. That was, that's it.